So welcome everyone to this lunch debates. Since we have international scholars as guests today, this lunch debate will continue in English. As you know, Holland College is not only the home of Metaforum, but also to LIAS, the Leuven Institute of Advanced Study. And twice a year, LIAS invites distinguished international fellows to discuss socially relevant topics. And this semester, LIAS project is on principles for balanced pension reform. Our current LIAS fellows are debating about what kind of pension system is sustainable and at the same time fair and socially responsible. We have already had the opportunity to participate in a number of public lectures and debates from this project, such as last night's discussion of the Dutch, German and French approaches. During this lunch debate, we will ask whether it is a good idea to keep older colleagues working as long as possible. Is working past retirement age a laudable trend? Raising the retirement age has caused much controversy in Western welfare states and has often been implemented under loud protest. Indeed, life expectancy has changed dramatically, but for some, the legal age is barely attainable and retirement comes not a moment too soon, while for others, the compulsory rest feels like a punishment. The question is to what extent governments can be flexible in setting statutory retirement ages. This discussion will be introduced by two LIAS fellows, Kène Henkens from NIDI, the Netherlands Interdisciplinary Demographic Institute of the Royal Netherlands Academy of Arts and Sciences in Den Hague, and Mo Wang. Dr. Mo Wang is a university distinguished professor and Lancelot McKeaton Eminent Scholar Chair at the Warrington College of Business at University of Florida. We have also invited Wim van Lancker, Faculty of Sociology and Political Science, to respond. I hand the floor to our dear colleagues, Kène Henkens and Mo Wang.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is the sound okay? Everything good? Okay, so very happy to be here. So my name is Mo Wang, so I'm at University of Florida, where has a lot of sunshine and a lot of retirees. So I should know one thing or two about this topic, right? So before we talk about whether working after retirement is a good idea, so I want to briefly talk about whether retirement does anything to people, right? So because when we talk about retirement, some people think, oh, if I'm retired, I'm stress-free, I'm gonna live on a beach, drinking cocktail, having happy hour. But then some other people feel like when they retired, okay, it's actually could be lonely, right? And they don't get to do with the work they like to do. They lose their, productivity, identity, right? So retirement, whether retirement is a curse or blessing, that has always been a question. So actually, it depends on a lot of factors. So here there are 5 sets of factors, and those findings are from all over the world, and what I'm telling you here is actually general consensus from the literature. So first of all, the individual attributes. So whether your retirement is going to be enjoyable or not depends a lot on your health, depends a lot on your financial means. Okay, so if you have poor health or if you have a health deterioration during the transition, your retirement is not going to be very enjoyable. And also if you have a financial deterioration, right? So if you lose income due to retirement, you lose significant income due to retirement, the retirement life is not going to be very enjoyable. Then the second set of factors is actually pre-retirement job factors. So what we found is actually when people retire from very stressful job, retirement is a very good thing, right? So then they get to take a break, they get to relax. But we also find that when people really like their job, especially when they like their social environment at the job, actually retirement could be pretty bad because then they lose this kind of social connection and they lose this kind of social support that they receive at the workplace. The third set of factors are family-related factors. Actually, the biggest factor is actually marital quality. So whether you have good relationship with your spouse, right? Because if you don't, well, then retiring kind of is bad, right? And then also whether you still have dependents at home. So whether you have kids still at home and not working yet, or if you have like older parents you have to take care of. So those actually are related to the well-being after retirement. And then retirement transition-related factors. So one very important one in the United States is actually whether your retirement is voluntary or involuntary. Because in United States, there's no mandatory retirement. So people can choose when to retire. Okay, but then a lot of time when you don't give people the option, for example, if the company says, okay, so we have to do layoff, you have to retire, well, that is not in people's plan, and the people don't react well to it, and the retirement is not as enjoyable. The last factor is the factor we're going to talk about today, which is post-retirement activities. So what you do after retirement matters. So the general finding we have is actually if you do a little bit of work after retirement, and it could be paid work or unpaid work like volunteering, actually both could be beneficial, a little bit beneficial to your well-being. But I will deal it in more details later. However, one thing I want you guys to think about is I want you guys to guess how many people are actually truly unhappy after retirement on a percentage sense? 30%? Any other? 10%? 10? Yeah? 50? So actually this is very interesting. So different countries actually have different findings. In the United States, actually about 20% of people, retirement actually significantly impact their happiness negatively, but 20%. And the 70 to 75% of people, retirement actually doesn't do much to their happiness. And there's about 5 to 10% of people, retirement is a good thing. So their well-being really improve after retirement. And in Germany, actually, it's also about a 70-75% people, retirement doesn't do much. But then they actually only have about 10 to 15% of people, retirement is a bad thing. Okay, and then they have about 10 to 15% of people, retirement is a good thing. But then in Australia, it's actually below 10%. So in Australia, retirees tend to be pretty okay after retirement. So yeah, so those are the nationally representative data. So I just want people to know. Actually, one reason the majority of people are usually okay with retirement is as a human being, we are very adaptive. So we actually adapt to the lifestyle pretty well. So we usually adjust our lifestyle, adjust our activities to make ourselves happy. So that's the one reason. So okay, so since we're going to talk about working after retirement, so one thing to know is working after retirement has become more and more prevalent. So this is the figure from the OECD countries. So you can see, so this is from 1990 to 2019, before pandemic. You can see the Japan, actually you can see a trend that is going up. United States, that's the blue line, that's going up. On average, OECD is going up as well, and the United Kingdom is going up, and France is at the bottom, but still going up a little bit, right? Okay, so actually here's something like so which country is on the top? Do you know? Do you guys want to guess? It's OECD country. What's the top country? It's actually Iceland. But what's the bottom country? What's lower than France? No, not Italy. It's Spain. Yeah, it's Spain. So yeah, but you can see like generally all those countries, you can see a little bit this kind of trend that is going up. And this is for people aged 65 and plus. right? So you can see in Japan is actually more than a quarter. Actually, right now, Japan is more than 30% of people older than 65, they are doing some work. So, all right, so another thing I want to mention is that retirement actually increasingly reflects diverse changes in a combination of work and non-work activities. So when we talk about working after retirement, we usually are not talking about people working full-time after retirement. We're talking about people engaging in some kind of work-related activities. Like it could be part-time work, it could be like volunteer work, as I mentioned before, or it could just be like they work on different things and as far as being productive. So at least in the United States right now, the workforce participation pattern is actually very diverse in the population. In European countries, it's a little bit different because European countries are still, a lot of them still have mandatory retirement. So then it often creates a pressure of like a full retirement rather than, still do some work. But I have some data from the United States may inform that. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, so working in retirement seems to be beneficial. I mean, like in the general data we see, okay? So, but is it really true, right? So, okay, so here I have data from the nationally representative United States data. So this is from the United States Health and it's called a Health and Retirement Study. So the United States actually invests a lot of money to collect this data. So it's a representative panel. It's 20,000 people. 20,000 people as soon older than 50, and then every 2 years they interview them, and they collect a lot of data from them. And the study has been tracked. It started in 1990, so it has been 33 years. So from this data, so it gives us a way to actually carefully evaluate whether working after retirement is a good thing. And here, so there are 4 categories. The first category is for people who don't retire, they just continue work. And for those group, we're using them as the baseline, right? Because we would want to compare everyone to that group, right? If they don't retire, what happens, right? So then the second group, so it's actually for people who take a bridge employment, which is take some work activity after they consider themselves retired. But the second group is a bridge employment in a different career field, which means the work they do is very different from what they've done in their career. Okay, so it could be like you're a doctor, but then you become a volunteer for a museum. So that's a different kind of career field. And then the third category is a career bridge employment, which is the work you do is directly connected or very similar to what you do before retirement. So if you're a doctor and then you still see some patient or provide some consult, so that would be the career bridge employment. And then the last group is the fully retired group. So basically they say, we're retired and we're not working. So the bar here is showing the physical health deterioration. So this is measured by the number of major diseases people have, okay? So the data here track over 4 years. Here we have this measure called the effect size, which is telling you whether this deterioration is strong or not strong. So in social science, usually 0.1 is actually small effect size. 0.2 is 0.2, 0.3 is a medium effect size. So it's not ignorable, okay? So what we did is we look at, we track the 4 groups of people before and after retirement. And then we also control for the baseline, because sometimes we know like people retire because of health issues, right? So we have to control for that baseline. And what we found is the group that actually, as soon as they retire, they just stop working, they actually have the largest effect size of health deterioration. So they have the largest number of increase in the physical diseases. And the other 3 groups are actually not significantly different. So basically for people who work a little bit So their health is similar. Their physical health is actually similar for people who just continue to work. Okay, so this is on the physical health deterioration. So it seems working a little bit, either you continue working or you work in a different field or work in a similar field, they are all better than just a fully retire, just stop working at once. Okay, so the finding is more interesting actually with the mental health deterioration. So mental health here we're measuring depression. So what we found is actually career bridge employment, which is you retire, but you still work on in a field that's similar to your career field. It actually has benefit on mental health. So that group actually fares the best in terms of mental health than all the three groups. But here still, working is still better than full retirement. But just we see even more benefit of working in a field that you're familiar with. So this data actually has been replicated multiple times. So we're pretty confident that this is the story in the United States. Okay, now the Dutch team.
Thank you very much. My name is Kène Henkens. The Netherlands. I work in the Netherlands, in The Hague, at the Demographic Institute, and similar research we do the same in the Netherlands. And I think, well, overall you might get the impression that working for after retirement is a good thing, based on these figures from the US. In the Netherlands, we did a similar study where we follow people in time, and there you see some difference, because not all the retirements and not all the work after retirement is similar. You can see a lot of stability if you follow people in time, pre-retirement, post-retirement, those who do not work, those who work for financial motives or enjoyment motives, but mainly the financial motives. There you see that the well-being of people goes down after retirement. So people who say, well, I'm still at work, but I do it only for financial motives, the well-being goes down. That's not the case for the people who say, I do it for fun, or I do it for social motives. So from that perspective, you might say, like, is it a laudable trend? No, maybe it's not. But at the same time, we do not know what happens with people who might want to work because of financial reasons and do not have a job. To get more insight in that, I did a study some years ago with Ellen Dingemans, a postdoc at NIDI, in which we used the data from Europe. There's a big panel study, Share Europe, and we asked the question, are working retirees happier than full-time retirees? And it was not so much the question like, in general, are they happier or not, that we wanted to know, but we want to know more about under what conditions are they more happy or less happy. So we focused on the relationship between bridge employment, working past retirement, and life satisfaction, but conditioned on their pension income, individual pension income of the people. And we looked at this individual resource, but we also extended the perspective to the more social resources. So does this relationship differ for those people who are alone or people who have a spouse? Or does this differ for countries that are relatively poor from countries that are relatively rich? It does not. Oh, wait. Yeah. So to study this, we use data of the Share. There's a huge study in Europe where they follow people in time. And we selected all retirees, that means those who receive a pension income, individual pension income, aged between 60 and 75 in the countries there portrayed. That's about 50,000 people in 16 countries. And we studied the relationship between working after retirement and life satisfaction. Life satisfaction is simply asked in this survey as on a scale from 1 to 10. That means 0 is completely dissatisfied with your life and 10 means completely satisfied. How satisfied are you with your life? In the model, and I don't want to go into detail in that, we look at fully retired people and look at the effect of whether it matters whether you work. That means paid work, not, and as in the story of Mo, voluntary work is not considered here. The pension income is the sum of public and occupational pensions that's established by the shared team of economists. It's a good measure of the pension income for all these individuals. The social context, we look at whether people have a spouse or the GDP per capita in the country. In the models, it's controlled for gender, age, health, which is always important, educational level, and etc. For those who might be interested in the details, you can find the paper in Research on Aging. Well, have a look at working after retirement in Europe. You see it's very diverse, with Estonia, on the right side hand, you see the percentage of people working. On the left hand, it's the average life expectancy. The dots are about the life expectancy. The bars are about the prevalence of post-retirement work. You see in Estonia, it's more than 20% of the people work past the retirement age. In Sweden, it's very high. Switzerland and Denmark, pretty well known. Life satisfaction in these countries is also very high. In Estonia, it's the lowest. At the other side, Spain, Slovenia, Poland, you see that working after retirement is much less frequent. And, well, overall, you could say a relationship with well-being is not immediately visible from these macro figures. To say a few words about these working retirees, overall, you could see in Europe more men, more highly educated people are relatively healthy. So that's a kind of general finding you most of the time find. In another study, I also looked at what type of work do people do. How can we characterize that? Like overall, you could say like 60% of the working retirees in Europe have, you could say, a light job. So a lot of flexibility, no hard physical work. It's a part-time basis. That's exactly what Mo said. It's an addition to your leisure life. But at the same time, 40% has physical demanding jobs, work a lot of hours. So that's also quite different in Europe. But the main question here for our study was, what is the relationship between work and well-being, and how is it dependent on the level of pension income for those individuals? And this symbol graph shows that. It's the Cohen's D again, which Mo introduced. You see, working after retirement is positively related with life satisfaction, but mainly for those with a low pension income. For those with high incomes, it might be a personal preference and people do it, but other people don't need it and they don't do it and they're as happy. So it's just a matter of individual choice. For the lower income groups, it's pretty different. Those who have a low income, they benefit substantial in terms of they have higher well-being if they work than if they don't work. The next question in our study was, okay, is this also dependent on whether you are alone or you have a spouse, or you have more household resources? And also here, you said, those who are alone, they benefit even more. People who are alone, who have low pension income, they have much higher well-being if they work after retirement than in case that they're alone, have low pension income, and have no work. Again, for those in the higher income groups, it doesn't matter that much. They might work if they want, they don't work if they don't want. We also looked at country differences, because of course in Russia or in England, it's a pretty different situation than in Sweden or in the Netherlands. So we looked whether this relationship differed also by GDP. And, there it is. Also here you see that in poor countries, this relationship between low pension income and the positive effect of work is much stronger than in countries that are more rich. And the interesting thing is, we also combined all these effects with very complex models, and then all of the effects remain. So you could say like, okay, if you're alone, if you have low pension income, you live in a country that's not too rich, then working after retirement makes your life much better than in a situation that you have alone, you have a low pension income and less access to resources on the country level. So the prevalence of working after retirement differs across EU countries very much. The work-life satisfaction next relies on the individual pension income and it depends upon the household and the country context. And that brings me back to the title of the presentation. Well, is it a laudable trend? Which is in a way a difficult question to answer. You could say, like, from a macro perspective, from the demographic developments, it's definitely a good thing because there are more people in the labor market, there are shortages everywhere. So from that perspective, it's fine. From the individual perspective, it is also fine, but it's also a kind of normative question. You could also, so if you get rid of all the pensions, many people will start working, but do we think it's a good idea on a societal level? Probably not. So then it's more a normative question and also a more difficult question. But at the same time, I think there's one other thing going on. It's not only that people work for the money or for the social context, it's also a way in which people, well, design their life course, that they'll find a life course of the post-retirement life course. And that's what you see in the Netherlands, where also the number of people working longer after retirement gradually increases every year. So it increases, it's not major, but it increases. And it's a country which is relatively rich, pensions are pretty good. So why do people work beyond post-retirement work? Well, this year I did a huge study in the Netherlands, a panel study where we follow people for 8 years till they are retired. All these people have now reached the public pension age. And in this summer we did this study and asked for those people who still at work, 10% of those people, they're all connected to a pension fund, so that's not a self-employed. They are still at work beyond the age of 67. And this is the reason why they say, I'm still working. That's pleasure work, feeling truly useful, that you mean something for others. There's a very generative motivations behind it. I've been asked by my employer, for example, social contact, and only 9% says, well, the money is a very important thing. Well, that gives an idea. So there is one story about poor pensions, working as a way to increase your life satisfaction, but there is another world too, which is gradually increasing, that people want to stay involved in work for a couple of hours a week or a day in a week for giving purpose to their life. Thank you.
Questions? There is a microphone, I suppose. Oh, ja, pardon, zeg, excuseer. Wim, excuseer, het is aan u. Wim van Lancker will nu respond to the both expositions.
So thank you for introducing me, for not forgetting me. Might be the age, of course. No, so thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the presentation. I'm an associate professor at the Center for Sociological Research here at the KU Leuven. I will keep it very short so that we have plenty of time for discussion. But thank you for the presentation. What I particularly liked is the emphasis on what good it does for individual people. Usually when we are talking about working longer, working after retirement, this is about macroeconomic stability reasons, it's about financial reasons, about sustainability of the welfare state. We need more people working because that's the only way we can afford these pensions in the end. And that's a very instrumental reason, right? And here you're really looking at, you know, what is this now good or not? When I first was looking at your presentation, my intuitive reaction was, of course this is not good, because what you see is low-income people tend to have to do this to sustain a sort of a decent living standard. Yeah, and they might benefit from this, but an alternative, of course, would be to make sure that everybody has a decent pension, so that there's no need to actually do this. But then, of course, there's much more nuance to this story, because people might have dreams, might have the actual wish to work longer, might have the wish to contribute to society. Then of course one question, and I think one important question is, and I don't think it featured centrally in your presentation, is does it need to be paid work? Or can it be voluntary work? Is it more important to continue contributing to society in one way or the other? Or does it need to be paid work in the labor market in your own field, or maybe a different field, and so on like that? So I think that is, at a societal level, but also at an individual level, a crucial question. And so I would like to hear your thoughts about this. The second thing is about the centrality of a work ethic. Right? I mean, you show these huge country differences. I think this is related to economic circumstances, as you showed with the controls for GDP. I think it also has to do with how pension systems actually function, you know, and there are huge differences there. But also about, you know, how central is work in society. And we know that people, you know, work has many functions, serves many functions, right? Since the famous unemployed of Marienthal study in 1936 in Austria, where they studied a village of people who became all of a sudden, by an external shock, almost everyone became unemployed. This had huge impact on people's sense of time, on people's sense of belonging, on people's sense of isolation, the sense of, you know, contribution to society. And that was actually the start of a field of study that tried to make sense of what does work actually mean for people. And it's of course about getting paid, it's about sustaining a living standard, but it's also, you know, having, you know, sort of a structured time, you know, a sort of predictability in how your day will look like. And, you know, and sort of your social status. I mean, work is strongly related to status. Certainly in this high income, highly educated, high status job. For instance, here at the KU Leuven, when a professor retires, basically this is associated not only with a loss of, you know, responsibility and a sense of belonging to the community, but also with the loss of status. Also built into the system, right? Because you're not able anymore to keep your own money, you're not able to supervise PhD students anymore. That's different in the US, for instance. It's also different in the UK and other countries. But how your system is structured will influence how people, you know, regard the centrality of work. And, you know, so is it then again, is it the centrality of work? How central is that in explaining the findings that you have? You showed some findings for the US specifically. You showed some findings more generally based on the share. But might that be a determinant of the share of people actually working after retirement, but also the effects of working after retirement for these different income groups? So a cultural explanation here might actually, you know, help us understand these cross-country differences any better. And finally, yeah, so the pension policies in themselves will also be very important, and also sort of the historical path dependency in how labor markets, how social security systems, how pension systems interact. Again, if we look at Belgium, for instance, the biggest challenge here is, I would say, is not necessarily, you know, making sure that more people work after retirement, but is making sure that people work longer before retirement, right? We have a retirement age of 65. A few years ago, it was raised to 67, but the average age of retirement is 60, right? But of course, then again, we see that we implement policies, which is called, it's very specific to Belgium, but it's called flexi jobs, which is a sort of a way of remaining in employment after retirement. It can be combined with a pension income. You don't pay any social security contributions. You hardly pay, I'm not sure whether you pay any taxes, but you hardly pay any taxes. But it's, you know, the risk is, of course, that you sort of take in you occupy certain positions that might be open for people who are actually in need of jobs during their active age. Because these sort of flexi jobs are usually geared towards towards catering and hospitality sector, which is basically a sector where low-skilled occupations should be available for people. And if you look at employment rates of low-skilled people, this is strongly below the European average, for instance, in a country like Belgium. So the consistency or the inconsistency, I would say, of policies probably will influence the exit rates into retirement, but at the same time also the probability of people to get into gainful employment. And so for me, these are like the sort of questions and thoughts I had when looking at the presentation. So about the cultural factors and the norms and the centrality of work ethic, the pension policies themselves. So yeah, thank you very much, and I'm happy to hear your thoughts about this.
I'll answer the first question about the effect of volunteer work. So there's actually some evidence now. So actually shows that actually volunteer work is quite beneficial. It usually is actually intrinsically driven, because no one would do volunteer work for things they are not interested in, right? So it fulfills personal needs, personal values. But the one issue here is if you look at the predictors of volunteer work after retirement, oftentimes it's a highly educated people. People have college degrees. For people who actually don't have college degrees, oftentimes what we see is the volunteer work is more or less related to religious organization, but not for like much broader social functions. So the evidence actually shows volunteer work is beneficial. So
maybe I can follow up. That's the same for the Netherlands, where volunteering is very widespread. Related to post-retirement work, it's a very good point that you made. We follow people in time and see in our study and see, hey, who is starting to volunteer. Many people do that after retirement. There's only one group that's not increasing volunteering. Those who remain in some kind of paid employment at, let's say, 5 hours a week. There is no increase in volunteering. The largest increase in volunteering is among those who seek paid employment but do not find it. So that's really a thing like sociologically we think, okay, why do people volunteer after retirement? Because they miss their weak ties, their colleagues, and so you find a kind of replacement. If you don't need that replacement, you don't see any increase in volunteering, while for those who fully retire or those who sought paid employment did not find it, there's a sharp increase in volunteering. So almost 50% of the retirees volunteer after retirement. So it's really a lot. So that's also a kind of question like, okay, suppose if we support post-retirement work and employers are more open to it, what effects will it have on other forms of social participation? So
you want to talk about?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I think they. Yeah.
I have two questions regarding the relationship between health deterioration and employment status. How do you know which way the causality runs? Do people work less because their health deteriorates, or is their health better because they keep working? So that's the first question. And the second is, both of you have shown, three of you have indicated there are considerable benefits of staying active after retirement, yet this seems to run counter to the decisions that people make, as was pointed out here in Belgium, for instance. A lot of people seem to actually want to stop working earlier. So is it because they don't realize all the benefits that they might have if they continue working? Or it seems completely contradictory, but maybe you have an explanation for it.
First question, in terms of causality, when we did the study, what we did is we treated it as a quasi-experiment, right? So we did a before and after comparison, and then we controlled for the baseline health, right? So at the beginning. But then actually later on, there were more studies using similar data. They actually add different kind of instruments So they did the instrument variable analysis, and the conclusion is consistent. So the findings are actually pretty robust. So basically both direction works. So you can predict whether people will retire or not based on their health situation, but at the same time, holding everything the same, retiring is gonna have some impact, and working after retirement is gonna have some impact on the health. So that's the first thing. The second thing, okay, so I have actually very interesting observation about this, which is in the United States, because we abolished mandatory retirement in 1986. That was a long time ago. So more or less, people now view retirement as a right to work kind of stage. So they are not paying too much attention about right to retire. They're paying more attention about right to work. So basically, it's about the freedom to participate in the labor force. That's occupying people's mind. I would put it this way. But this is a gradual change, right? So in the 90s, so if you look at the earliest waves of health and the retirement study, the average retirement age is actually about 58 in the United States. So that's actually 2 years before they are eligible for Social Security. So at that time, actually, I would describe the mindset is a right to retire. So they feel like, oh, I want to retire. I have enough saving to last me for 2 years. Then I will draw my Social Security. So they want to retire. But now we see the average retirement age is moving up, not just because there's no mandatory retirement, right? So it's not because of the Social Security eligibility age. Rather, it's actually because of, I think there's a cultural value change. People feel like, hey, if I can work longer, why not? And well, in US, I mean, also like when you work longer, you actually have, because it's a lot of time it's a defined contribution system. So you actually contribute more into your pension fund, and you actually have a bigger nesting egg. So I think it's a culture shift. I think my observation is I think Europe is usually 10 years behind the US in terms of those kind of values and stuff. So I think it will probably move, especially given the labor force shortage. I think the government is all trying to encourage people to work longer. I think we'll see a little bit shift. So.
Well, yeah, and I think it's very important to realize that post-retirement work is very, very different from career work. So the observations you see here in Belgium are pretty similar from the observation in the Netherlands. So people who retire or fully retire, their vitality goes up. They're happier in many cases, but that's something different than being totally loose from the labor market. So when people work, they work on average 13 hours, I think, a week, while people worked full-time before. So it is just part of life. And if it's a part with a lot of flexibility, it has benefits, but a lot of flexibility. Majority of people say, I can quit tomorrow if I like. So it gives you all kinds of benefits without a lot of obligations, which is totally different than raising the retirement age with 3 years, with 5 years in the Netherlands, which was also received with a lot of discontent. So that's a bit of a different story. So but they go together, but fine. So they're not contradictory.
Thank you, both Mo and Kène, for your very interesting presentation. I have a question regarding this one slide showing the differences between the countries. So in Iceland and Denmark, so many persons still working after retirement, and so the last or the country with the least working retirees was Spain. And I have to say, for me, it is not much of a surprise if we consider, and that is my question, if these share elements also show the role of the labor market, because we know, for instance, that in Spain, the youth unemployment is so high, is still over 20%. For me, it is not really a surprise that the pensioners there do not really want to let's say, take away the employment, the jobs from the younger generation. So it could be not just a correlation, but also a causality between this labor market situation and the decisions of the retirees about their future. Yeah?
So I once was in Spain. There was the presenter before me had a strong argument to lower the retirement age because of high youth unemployment. At the same time, I think economists showed in many studies that this lump of labor fallacy, so it's not one piece of pie that we have to distribute over the population. So if people work longer, the labor market grows. And that also reduces youth unemployment. So this classical discussion about, hey, should the jobs go to the youth or to the is in a way, I think, well, Casper knows better, but I think it's kind of resolved that it's not
Exactly. So the evidence is very clear. Like making people retire early doesn't necessarily create jobs for younger people. Actually, it decreases the consumption level of the country. Actually, in a sense, it hurts younger people's job opportunity. So yeah, so there are a lot of econ research on this. So yeah, so.
Biased, and that it is more acceptable to say, well, my life is still successful. So the idea to measure health seems to be a more objective way of have you managed that kind of problem?
Well, it's a very good question. There are many ways to measure well-being and depression, etc. So the first slides I showed about the Netherlands use a multi-item scale. In the share data, they have this one-item satisfaction question. There is always a problem with asking about satisfaction. That's my feeling in all studies, because most people are satisfied. So and it does not mean that they are happy, but they are kind of satisfied. So there might be a bias or underreporting of unhappiness. That's not the same as that it's invalid, because the correlation with other measures is pretty good, I think.
So if working, especially if the quality of the kind of work you do gives you the feeling that your life or that your living is worthwhile, that means that apart from just gaining money, feeling important is quite important. So why are the labor unions always busy with money and with all these kinds of financial, instrumental things, and not so much with the quality of work, so that the right to have work that is meaningful? So why has these labor unions always... Yeah.
Well, so I think the a large reaction like that is usually built on the early econ research, which shows that actually having more money, people are happier. So actually very early on, like you actually have those evidence, and I think that's. And then from the labor economy standpoint, because they're always talking about productivity and also consumption. So so what's the easiest way to measure consumption? The amount of money you make, right? So, but the thing is, I think now more and more, I'm trained as a psychologist by my background. So actually more and more we're incorporating happiness and well-being into this kind of indices, right? But educating people, it's a gradual process. I think you have to convince the labor union, hey, you cannot just only care about the amount of money, but rather you also should build the well-being index into your negotiation. It's education. Yeah. It's education.
Maybe I can follow up on that. I see your point. What you see in the Netherlands, and broader in discussions also in science, is a strong emphasis about on the demanding side of jobs, but not on the rewarding sides of jobs. So if you want to introduce kind of policies within organizations, oh yeah, the older worker has to be relieved or thing. But it's not thinking like, hey, how can we make the content of work more interesting? So tying people to the labor market is not reducing demands is not the way to do that. It's making the work more interesting, more challenging. And I think that's also pretty solid findings from science. It's not so much the demanding side that people go. The most important thing is that the work is just not interesting anymore, so it has nothing new to offer.
Yeah, if there's still time for... Yep. Oh, yeah,
physical activity can slow down aging. And of course, these people are in the midst of the aging process at 65. So to what extent do you think that the jobs that they're doing would increase their physical activity? The number of steps they take per day, for instance, is one measure that people use, and thereby have a health benefit? Or do you think it's a psychological effect rather than physical exercise?
So actually the findings usually show that you don't need a lot of physical activity. You need the right amount of physical activity, because over-exercising is not good. Because when we are older, the bone actually, oftentimes the bone and the muscle skeleton, the way they take pressure is different. So yeah, certain level of physical activity is good. It can be built onto your day-to-day exercise. It doesn't have to be through work. But from work, a lot you get is the meaning, meaning of work, right? Because you are, like Ken was showing, right? So you feel productive, and that's very important. You have your work identity, which our professional identity is very central to who we are. So by working, you actually fulfill that kind of identity. And also, as I mentioned earlier, you have the social environment at work, which is a very important supplement to your social life. So I would say like a work, from my standpoint, work actually has a lot of benefit from the psychological side. The physical side, I think it probably won't be that different from, hey, if you allocate time to exercise a half hour every day, I think that's probably gonna be the same, so.
So maybe for a final question, I would like to challenge you both a little bit, because you're both experts in this field. And so I learned that, it's good for people's health to work after retirement. That's a pretty robust finding. We also mentioned, but voluntary work is also very beneficial for people's health. You mentioned that there might be some kind of trade-off there in terms of, the people doing actually voluntary work, or the amount of voluntary work being conducted might be slightly less if people keep on working. And of course, at that age range, there's a lot of care work as well, which has an important social function and societal function as well, which might be jeopardized if you encourage people to work after retirement. So would you say, so you mentioned that Europe is more or less 10 years behind the US in terms of thinking and the values around this. Would you say that European welfare states need to encourage this, that they need to enact policies that actually push people after retirement in the labor market, or should we maybe focus more on encouraging people to voluntary work, care work, and make sure that decent pensions are the core issue here? So should we as European welfare states, given demographic aging, given all the challenges that we're confronted with, should we go that route?
Oh, that's a very good question. Actually, one thing, this visit, actually, I learned a lot. And the one thing I learned is in Europe, the policy-making logic is very different from in the United States, because in the United States you have to frame it as a freedom for doing certain things. You cannot be pushing people to do certain things, because if you push, then they're gonna. That's when the Donald Trump showed up, right? So, I think the policy can encourage, and the policy can help remove barriers, but I don't believe to push. We should not be designing something to make everyone go that way. I don't, but that's my logic from the US background, so, yeah.
I agree too. I don't think we should push people into the labor market after their retirement, so that was my point about the level of pensions, of course. It's not a good idea, in my view, just okay, if you don't have enough, you just start working. At the same time, I believe that due to the demographic developments, we will see a development the coming decades of a labor market for pensioners. So you see it in the Netherlands, it's discussed, but it's just increasing every year, and that will also change the norm. I did a study among Dutch employers over a couple of years, and you see the norms changing. So the whole argument about youth unemployment, you never hear anymore. So it's okay, they feel welcome, they're useful, so I think this shift will continue because, you never know, of course, with the economy, but there is no expectation that we have mass unemployment in 10 years because we're only talking about migration as a way to solve the labor shortages. So I think it will gradually change, and that I have no idea what the balance is. So whether 25% of the people will stay in employment. But in the study, the final slide I showed about the motives, we asked in this study also people, to what age do you intend to keep on working? Well, the average age was 75. So it's also that people envision that they continue that, if it's possible to continue it for a long time, that will mean that it will keep on increasing, and that will change the norms, even without a policy.
Conclude this session. Thank you very much, Wim van Lancker, Mo Wang, and Kène Henkens. It was a marvelous introduction, and thank you for this discussion.